Hello, all of you out there. As usual, my temperature kind of hits the height of the mountain top anytime I want to do this program, especially when I have somebody who is very exciting, experienced, and has, considerably traveled. That is the kind of person I have today, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to that. I just leave you to introduce yourself. I only call you Peter.
Okay.
Go ahead and to introduce yourself briefly.
Very good. Thank you, Uche. My name is Peter Worthing. I'm a faculty member at TCU. I work in the history department, and my field of teaching and research is modern Chinese history. I'm an American. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, so I kind of identify as a New Englander, but I've
Okay.
now been living in Texas for almost 25 years. So I've bounced around a couple different places in the US, and I've also done a fair amount of international traveling. And I
All
think
right. Which team do you support? You lived there for 25 years, but from New England. Which team? Which football team do you support?
you're asking a very important question, Uche. It
Yeah.
is my firm belief that if you
Yes.
move to a new location, you have an obligation to support the local sports team. And yet,
I
I'm,
agree.
I'm surrounded by so many people who have come here from elsewhere and they refuse to do this. So my belief, I seem to be the only one who has this belief in the entire Metroplex, but I
You
do
know,
support the local sports teams here.
you know what? That is the philosophy behind this program. When you leave your comfort zone, wherever you're born, and go to a new place, yeah, you better adapt to what happens in that place. Now, when you go back to where you are king, of course, you go back and become king.
Yeah.
And
It
that is, go
it
ahead.
doesn't it doesn't mean you have to give up earlier
No,
allegiances. You
no.
can maintain more than one sports team in your heart. But
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, for people who are just joining us the first time, this is a cross-cultural experience where I invite a guest who must have left his or her culture of origin, traveled, or lived in some other place, and is willing to share the experience. Now, whatever that experience is not too relevant. What is most important is what did you learn from there? And that's why Peter is here today. And he's a historian. And so I'm very, very positive he's going to bring in some historical context,
yeah,
to what we're okay, let's go ahead and share your experience.
my experience is somewhat historical because it took place quite a long time ago. The most important
Yes.
international or intercultural experience I've had, Uche, was living and studying in China. When I
Okay.
finished as an undergraduate college student, I ended up going to China. At first, I went to Taiwan and spent a summer session studying Chinese. And then from there, I moved directly to the Chinese mainland where I spent the next academic year. So I spent, basically a full calendar year living and studying in China. And that was a really powerful experience on a younger Peter Worthing. And this would have been the mid to late 1980s.
You
And
speak Mandarin by
yes,
any you
yes,
do? Ni
yeah.
hao.
Oh, well, no, ni hao
Ah,
ma.
no, that's all I can speak. All
That's
right.
very good.
All right, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
That's quite all right. That's one of the things we used to do is try to engage with Chinese people in conversation, but then get away before they could realize we couldn't go much further than what we had just said. Pass ourselves off as more fluent than we actually were. But I really had so much fun, and it was as a young person, it was such an influential experience to spend a year living in another place and another culture and interacting with all kinds of people.
Wow. Do you want to zero in on one of those experiences that you
I,
want to
I,
share?
I sure it's hard to zero in on a single experience, but
Yeah.
it was so important, I think, to be in the minority. Having come from the United States as a young white boy,
Yeah.
I was always in the dominant group. And then to move to China and be in the minority group. And, there were really very few Westerners in China at that time in the 1980s.
That
And
must have been something.
it was. And it was interesting, Uche, in part because we were certainly a minority,
Yeah.
but we were in many ways a privileged minority.
Okay.
In other words, for example, the people who ran the university where I was studying, they wanted us to have a good experience. So
Okay.
they did their best to take care of us. And we were something of an attraction to the Chinese people. It was not uncommon at all for people just on the street to come over to us and ask to take their picture with us. And so they would just, want to stand with us and have a picture taken, even though we didn't know them at all.
Tell me something. Were you a celebrity of sorts?
I guess you could say that. We garnered a bit of attention. And for example, there was a clothing store in downtown. The city was Xi'an. It's to the southwest of Beijing. It's
Yeah.
not it wasn't a prominent city back then, but we felt it was a little bit off the beaten path. And there was a department store that sold clothing, and they came to the university and they said, "Hey, will some of you foreign students, meaning you Western students,
Yeah.
pose for us for advertisements?" So three or four of us said, "Sure." We got in the car, we drove downtown. They put their jackets and hats on us, and we posed, and they took pictures of us. And a week later, there were all these pictures of us modeling their clothing outside the store.
Oh, yeah?
So we were a little bit of a celebrity.
Okay.
But at the same time, Uchi, was interesting because we were also targets for a little bit of what you might call discrimination. In other words, they thought we were quite wealthy.
Oh,
And so we would go to purchase something, and there would be a sign on the wall in Chinese that said the price of the item we were going to purchase. And we would walk up and put it on the counter, and the clerk, you could see the wheels turning in the clerk's head, and the clerk would all of a sudden lay out a different price that was much higher, thinking, we had all this money, they could get a little more money out of us. So we had to be a little wary of that.
right. You know what you have just said? It's also you could get it in at least in Nigeria where I come from and other places. When a white man walks in, the assumption is that okay, this is not even a human being, it's dollar walking
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah.
And then prices might just skyrocket.
Just go up a little bit. And that did happen, but that,
Yeah.
that was by no means our daily experience. For the most
Okay.
part, we had just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, one
And
of the things I think I was in Beijing in 2017, and one of the things I really enjoyed in China was just walking along the street, and I saw a couple of elderly people, women, men there in the morning hours, just dancing.
yes,
So I joined them. Then after the dance, I asked, okay, why were we dancing? They said, no, it's just, we are old and then we are enjoying the final years of our lives.
yes.
And then they look very healthy doing that because they came back in the evening, did the same thing. I know, did you have any
I, I,
experience like
I
that?
saw that all the time, Uche,
Yeah,
early in the morning, and then
yeah,
again at sundown, dusk.
right.
Whatever open spaces there would be on campus, off campus, parks, little neighborhoods, there were always people. Some of them were dancing, some
Yeah,
of them were doing Tai Chi,
yeah.
some of them were simply doing things like walking backwards. That was a big exercise in China, walking backwards. So
Backwards.
you'd see often elderly people walking backwards as a form of
Okay.
exercise. And
Yeah,
you're right, everybody was happy. Everybody was enjoying the outside. Everyone was enjoying the exercise. And
yeah.
and sometimes there were loudspeakers that would play music. And so you
Yes.
would enjoy that as you were walking or exercising. I saw that all the time.
Any other thing, any other remarkable things before I will be asking you my final question? Because you said the school treated you a little bit differently. Could you expound on that?
They wanted us to have a good experience because they
Yeah.
wanted more students to come back. And so, for
Ah, okay.
example, if any of us fell ill, they would immediately escort us to the hospital and help us get see a doctor and get well. They organized little excursions for us to see cultural
Okay.
sites or to go have
Yeah.
fun. They organized, we would go see acrobats and shows like that. We went to a real Chinese movie theater one time to see a movie. So, they were really good about making sure we had a good time. But the other thing I'll tell you about this experience, Uche, that was so important to me is
Yes.
I met so many people from other parts of the world when I was in China.
Okay.
In my school, my university, and in my dormitory, they were half American and half Japanese.
Oh,
So we made friends with all these Japanese students. And then across town, there was another university that specialized in engineering. And there were all kinds of African and Middle Eastern students there on
students.
scholarship to study engineering. And, I had a very good friend from Sudan. I had another very good friend from Yemen. And on the weekends, we would go over there or they would come over to our university and we would find ways to have fun. The first time I ever heard Bob Marley music was from those guys at their
In
party.
China.
Yeah, in China. I had never encountered it as a young person in Massachusetts, but in
Yeah.
China, and I fell in love with it. And we had so much fun. And I traveled with them sometimes. We'd get on the train and go to a different city and visit other places, talk to Chinese people on the train. So meeting not only these Chinese folks and engaging with them, but meeting these other people from all over the world. I met a Russian guy on the train.
Yeah.
Uh, I just had so much fun talking to different people from different parts of the world during those years.
Yeah. Tell me something. What did that, meeting all this variety of people from all over the world, what did that do to your view of the world, our world?
It's hard to describe what that did, other than to
Yeah.
say it was almost like throwing open a window that I didn't know I had never seen this view before.
Okay.
I remember very clearly one young man talking about Muammar Gaddafi.
Of Libya.
Yeah, from Libya. And I didn't know really anything about him or anything. And I don't even recall the specifics of what he was saying. But, he was talking about him in a way that I'd never heard anybody speak about Gaddafi. I'd only heard a little bit in the United States. And of course, it was
Yeah,
all bad.
yeah, right.
But this young man was quite a supporter of Gaddafi. And the Russian that I met on the train, when I met a Russian, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this may be problematic. And of course it was. And we had a great conversation. We talked about ice hockey. We were both ice hockey players.
Oh,
And
yeah?
he had enough English and he had a little Chinese we could communicate. And we talked about playing ice hockey and it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
So, that's really what I remember about those years in China.
Yeah. Tell me, sir, let me bring you back to your classroom. To what extent do you bring all these experiences back to the classroom as a historian?
Uh, I try not to bring myself into it too much. In other words,
Yes.
offer too many of my own personal experiences.
All right.
Although I do sometimes drop a little anecdote or a story because I think it helps them see it all as more personal rather than just kind of theoretical.
Okay.
But what I really try to do in my classes is to help students see things from the perspective of other people and other cultures and other times. Because I think that's such an important skill, Uche. You can't go through life understanding everything through your own frame of reference. You have to have your own ideas, your own views, but you have to understand not everyone will share those. And,
Correct.
and rather than just kind of reject anybody else's view because it's not your own experience, you need to be able to stop and say, okay, I can understand why this person sees it that way or sees it differently than I do. So
Yes.
in the classroom, I've kind of taken my own experience of travel and meeting other people and listening to other points of view, especially cultural points of view, and try to bring that to my students in our own little classroom in Fort Worth, Texas, or try to help them have a miniature version of that experience, if you will.
Right. We have a saying in where I come from that the child who is widely traveled
Hmm.
has more wisdom than an old man who has remained at a spot all his life.
I agree wholeheartedly. That's absolutely true. And I
Now,
always try to encourage my students to travel, to use study abroad,
yeah,
perhaps to get away, because the how shall we say the out of classroom experience when you do something like that, when you travel, when you spend a certain amount of time among uh, people of a different culture, different perspective is so valuable.
Okay, let me now try to summarize. I wish we had all the time in this world. But before I do that summary, let me also remind people cross-cultural experience. If you want to reach out to me and be a guest, it's called I mean, you get to me through this address, crossculturalexperiences@gmail.com. Remember the S, crossculturalexperiences@gmail.com. Then I'll get back to you and then we start talking. Peter, let me ask you maybe one final question. Now, putting all these things together, what did you learn from your Chinese experience? If somebody can ask you, please tell me in one sentence, what did you learn from that?
On a very basic level,
Yeah,
Uche, I
yes.
think I learned that my view is just one of so many in the world. I mean, I grew up in a town, and I grew up in a place that was a university town. So, there were lots of different people there talking about different things, but I don't know that I really paid attention. I grew up in a little bubble. I had my friends, I had my family, and that is what I knew. I went off to college, and that bubble started to expand a little bit. And then
Right.
I went to China, and it was just blown out of all proportion.
Okay.
I think that is really what I came away thinking or understanding is that my own view and my own understanding of things was just one of many different ways that people understand things or see things. And
I think, yeah, that experience, I believe, helped you a lot. And then let me also end it with another saying where I come from, because we talk in Proverbs. They say, when a child washes his or her hands, he or she dines with the elders in terms of wisdom. Okay, I want to thank you very, very much for your time. And probably this is so interesting. I'm probably invite you back sometime much later to start maybe looking at some of the little things that you experience in China. But thank you for now, and have a good rest of your day.
thank you, Uche. It was my pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye bye.